Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're here. We're finally at the character that I think everyone is going to be wanting at the start of Honkai Star Rail. Honkai analysis or Honkai Star Rail analysis on Seele, the Quantum Hunt character. And as I just said, this character is an absolute unit. You get this character, you're pretty much set until the next overpowered DPS comes into play. But we have to get into that in just a second. We have to explain what Quantum and Hunt is. Well, Hunt is just a single target DPS. Nothing too special about that. Just, they hit one enemy most of the time, and in Seele's case, she only hits one enemy, and that's fine. As for Quantum, again, it's different from the other elements. Quantum, on top of applying its own Quantum dot effect when you weakness break the enemy, it also pushes the enemy back in the turn order, which is a handy-dandy tool to abuse in the correct situations. That we have to outline, but now that that is outlined, Quantum and Hunt is known. Let's get into her kit. And well, this is going to be probably one of the quicker videos because her kit is very simple. Her skill, deal quantum damage equal to a certain percentage of Seele's attack to a single enemy. Seele gains 25% speed for 2 turns. You use your skill, it hits one enemy, you gain speed. There's nothing more to it, you deal damage. It's a lot of percentage, by the way, 242% at the high end, so very high damage right there. Going on to her ultimate, Seele enters the buffed state and deals quantum damage equal to a certain percentage of Seele's attack to a single enemy. You essentially deal more damage to a single enemy, and you enter a buffed state. Now, the buff state is explained in the talent, but the ultimate right now, very good as well. Your skill and your ultimate, just a lot of single target damage. The speed gain on the skill is very important. Going on to the talent, though, Seele enters a buff state upon defeating an enemy, and receives an extra action while in the buff state. Seele increases her damage by 40, 80, and 88% for 1 turn. Enemies defeated in the extra action provided by the talent will not reappear, will not trigger again in the talent. So essentially you can't infinite chain this buff state. But essentially this buff state that was mentioned in the ultimate is just this damage bonus right here. It's nothing too complex. I don't know why they didn't kind of include it as its single thing and just tell you where it triggers from, but they have it in separate areas. But yeah, you have single target damage from your skill and your ultimate. Your ultimate provides a buff state which gives you more damage boost, and it's quite straightforward. You have a lot of single target damage boost, and honestly, if you think about it, this is the ultimate's base damage, and then every single time you use your ultimate, you get X amount of damage boost, so it is very, very powerful. It's 40 at level 1, by the way. That's a lot, by the way. But yeah, incredibly good so far. The character literally will one-shot almost all the enemies if you have her built in any way, shape, or form, so it's very good. Going on to the technique, though, after using her technique, Seele gains stealth for 20 seconds. While stealth is active, Seele cannot be detected by enemies in the overworld. That is, in that overworld section where you encounter enemies. And then when she attacks enemies to trigger the combat, Seele will immediately enter the buff state. So you just start combat in the buff state, which may actually prove to be a very useful thing if you want to get some early ramp damage up. Ramping is going to be probably very important in this, how quickly can you set things up, and this seems like one of the good ones because you can always and immediately start with your buff state, and then go into a skill or something, and go into whatever, and always deal high amounts of damage. But that's that. The character is incredibly good so far. Literally, one of the simpler kits out there, single target damage. If I was to say anything, she's like a 5-star variant of Li Su Shang, who is the 4-star variant of like single target high turn frequency, because that is all that her kit right now is. It's high single target damage and high turn frequency because you have a lot of speed, right? This is 25 speed for 2 turns, or 25% rather, after you use a skill. It's very, very good. But again, more stuff in the traces. First trace. When Seele's HP is at 50% of max or lower, reduce the chance of her being attacked by enemies, so you have a bit of a safety mechanism to not get killed, which is great. Trace 2, after using a basic attack, Seele's next action will be advanced forward 20%, so it's a bit more turn frequency. Obviously, using the normal attack is not highly advised, but it's a nice bonus if you don't have any skill points or any energy to cast your stuff. You're going to have to use this, and so having that turn advancement is very good. And the last one, incredibly powerful, while in the buff state, so her damage boosted state, Seele's quantum resistance penetration increases by 20%, so you're more and more effective against quantum characters or quantum enemies, whatever you're facing that is quantum, you're more effective against it, which is incredibly powerful. Not many characters have this, at least I think only one other character has had something similar. Which, by the way, this is incredibly powerful for a standalone kit. In terms of like the raw damage factor, this is incredibly powerful. If you're looking for any type of support, any type of utility from Seele, you're looking at the wrong character. This is not that character. She's not going to do anything like that, and does not do anything like that anywhere in her Eidolons either, or her Light Cone, anywhere like that. So no support here. But if you're looking for probably the single-handedly strongest unit in the game when it comes to raw damage throughput, Seele is probably going to be the choice of the year. So that is that. Standalone kit as well, and also with Eidolons. That's just where she'll sit. But speaking of Eidolons, let's get into them, right? So Eidolon 1. The speed boost effect of Seele's skill can stack up to 2 times, which is incredibly powerful as you can now get 50% speed increase. By the way, her light cone and her general set that I'm going to recommend to you for relic sets and planetary ornaments is the speed dependency ones. So the character will be incredibly powerful there. Going on to the next Eidolon. When dealing damage to an enemy whose HP is at 50% of their max or lower, Seele's crit rate increases by 15%. Makes her a bit more of an execute character, which is kind of like what she is. Specifically, if you get into single boss situations, that like bossing, and that's kind of what she's going to be doing. If you get into those situations, she's going to be extremely powerful with this Eidolon because of the execute mechanic being introduced, which is always going to be great. And if you think of like some sort of relic sets and planetary ornaments, you may be able to get 100% crit rate, but that's obviously in just a minute. We'll talk about that. Eidolon 3, skill +2 and basic attack +1. Very good. All of her things being leveled up is actually really important. So, unironically, Eidolon 3 and 5 is very important on this character as well. It's just going to boost her damage by a very large chunk, as we can see here with her skill. Just 1 level boost, because we know that, you know, looking at these 3 numbers, the jump from the second number to the third number is 1 level. And so she's able to get a 22% damage boost just from 1 level of her skill. So it's actually very crucial for this character because all her damage is centered around her skill and her ultimate. It's actually kind of crucial to level her up. So unironically, Eidolon 3 and 5 are actually very powerful on her. But yeah, that's that. Skill 2 and basic attack 1 on Eidolon 3. Eidolon 4, Seele regenerates 15 energy when she defeats an enemy. This is a bit more used for if you're doing quick fire matches, not really bossing. This is for quick fire matches. You encounter 4 enemies, you kill 1, you get energy, kill 1, you get energy, use a burst, you know, so on and so forth. This is not really for bossing, so it's kind of okay. It makes her a bit more diverse, but not by much, so it's fine. It's a fine Eidolon. That's all it is. And then Eidolon 5, ultimate +2, basic attack +1, very good. And then Eidolon 6, again, I've said this in the last few videos, Eidolon 6s in this game are just not that good. So going into this one, after Seele uses her ultimate, inflict the target enemy with the Butterfly Flurry for 1 turn. Enemies suffering from Butterfly Flurry take an additional quantum damage equal to 18% of the, Seele's ultimate damage every time they are attacked. If the enemy is defeated by the Butterfly Flurry damage triggered by other allies, Seele's talent will not be triggered, and then when Seele is knocked down, the Butterfly effect will be removed from the enemy. It's like okay. Like, I don't want to make it sound like it's a bad Eidolon, but it's like really nothing too crazy. It's not like game changing. It's not super interesting. It's not some high percentage. It's not really overly interesting, at least in my turn. In my opinion, rather. I read turn and said turn for some reason. In my opinion. Now, is it strong? Kind of. If you can kind of make it so the enemy doesn't have a turn until all your characters have attacked, then yes, it's going to be pretty good because in my mind, how I believe it will work is you apply the effect, the butterfly effect, to an enemy, and until their turn, or their next turn essentially, the effect will be on them. And so if your whole team can attack before the enemy attacks, they'll all be able to trigger almost a full value Seele ultimate for free, right? Because it's just you had it. But I like to kind of look at these Eidolons, not really in a sense of what is their potential, but how is it going to feel the moment you get it, right? The millisecond that you get the Eidolon, how does it going to feel? And it's just not that high value. The value for Seele stops at about Eidolon 2. The only reason I'd ever recommend going higher than that is just for Eidolon 3 to get the skill level up, and so your skill does more damage. But other than that, the value stops at Eidolon 2 because these first 2 Eidolons are incredible. You get an extra 25% on Eidolon 1, and 25% speed, that is. And you get a crit rate boost at execute levels of health on Eidolon 2. So it's just, these 2 are the highest value. That's all it is, really. So that's that. The character isn't bad at high Eidolons, but it's just not worth investing because it's not that much power gain. And the character will be incredibly powerful as is already, right? So that is that. Seele is an absolute monstrous unit, by the way. She's kind of, from my understanding, known to be a character who can have like 8 turns before the enemy has 1 You know, she can have a lot of turns if you build her with the right teams, if you go for full speed, if you go for full turn advancement, if you go for full, just kind of juicing up her speed and making her attack as frequently as possible, she can kind of like wipe out the team before they even have one turn because of how much speed she has. But that's obviously very niche situations, obviously if you have that stuff available to you, which not everyone does, so it's absolutely fine. But still, regardless of those things, she's an absolute monster and gets enhanced by her light cone furthermore. Now, her signature is obviously going to be her best, and her signature plays around her perfectly. So it increases the wearer's crit rate by a flat percentage, which is 12 to 24, depending on your level, which is very, very good, by the way. And then while the wearer is in battle, for every 10 speed that exceeds 100, increase the wearer's basic attack and skill damage by a certain percentage, and increase their crit damage of their ultimate by a certain percentage, stacking up to 8 times. Very powerful. But it does cap out at 180 speed, so that is kind of like where the light cone will reach its maximum value, is 180 speed, right? Because you can only get 8 stacks of it, right? But in the grand scheme of things, these percentages may seem small, but remember that they do stack up to 8 times, so it's 8 times 6, which ends up being, what is that, like 48? 48% standalone, I believe, if my maths is like not terrible. 6 times 6 is 36 plus an extra 12. Yeah, 48. You can get, just with level 1, you get 48 basic attack and skill damage, and then on the ultimate, you get 8 times 8, which is the 64. So you get a lot of percentage here standalone. So imagining it at high levels is incredibly powerful. But regardless of like the actual values, a very powerful light cone here, and it's going to be her best in slot. Now you do have other options. You have cruising in the Stellar Sea, increase the wearer's crit rate by a certain percentage, and they crit rate against enemies with less HP than 50% by an additional certain percentage. So it makes her a good character whilst the enemy is healthy. It makes the character even better once they're in execute range. And obviously, if you know, Seele's Eidolon 2 is also execute range, so you can obviously not build as much crit rate through your substats or your actual stats, and get all of it just through the light code and Eidolon 2 if you are lucky enough to have the Eidolon 2. But that's obviously a very niche build. And then furthermore, when the wearer defeats an enemy, increase their attack by a certain percentage, which is also very powerful. But this kind of build is a bit more for, let's say, when you're running into constant amount of enemies, small enemies. This is not necessarily for bossing, in my opinion, as you have to defeat an enemy to get that last attack boost. Other than that, you're just rocking the crit rate, which, to be quite frank, is not bad on bossing. Crit rate is always welcome on bossing because just crit rate in it. It's great. That's all it is. But yeah, cruising in the Stellar Sea is a fine substitute. It's not going to be as good as in the night, but it is a fine substitute. And Sleep Like the Dead, increase the wearer's crit damage by a certain percentage, and then when the wearer's basic attack or skill does not result in a crit hit, increase their crit rate by a certain percentage for the next turn. This effect can only be triggered 1 time every 3 turns. This one is a bit nicher, it's a bit weirder, but you do get a crit damage boost straight up, straight away, which is very, very powerful, by the way. And if you do get like just a decent crit rate build for your character, you can use this just to get that crit damage boost if you want to have some universality to Seele. It's going to be fine, absolutely. It's kind of one of these things that you'll have to balance your crit rate and crit damage ratio for the character. Obviously, if you have better relic sets with crit damage, then I'd recommend something like Cruising the Stellar Sea, if you do have it, obviously, because then you'll have a better ratio. You'll have to get that crit rate boost through something. Obviously, Seele's can offer that as well. But yeah, this just offers crit damage boost as well as a potentially crit rate boost if you don't crit. But it's kind of like you're kind of playing with the dice a lot here. With Sleep Like the Dead, it's a lot of chance, it's a lot of like waiting, more turns need to pass by for you to get another crit. So it's just a bit of unnecessary blubbery, right? I'll use that term, unnecessary blubbery. But obviously 5 stars again, they're not even the standard I want to compare everything to. 4 stars is the great place to be. So looking at the first one, Only Silence Remains, increase the attack of its wearer by a certain percentage. If there are 2 or fewer enemies on the field, increase crit rate by a specific amount. A very good, again, universal one. It's a bit more standard. You have permanent buffs active at permanent times. If you're playing towards the character's strength, which is single target enemies, then you're going to have all these percentages active at all time, which is fine. This is a great choice. No harm done here. Return to Darkness, increase the wearer's crit rate by a flat percent. That's fine. And after a crit hit, there is a certain percentage fixed chance to dispel 1 buff on the enemy. A bit more utility. You have a chance to dispel, so I wouldn't recommend it wholeheartedly because the character is not meant for utility. But it's a fine option if you have it. The crit rate is always useful, and having some sort of utility is never harmful, but the character's not really built for that, so I wouldn't recommend it. And then Swordplay, for each time the wearer hits the same target, damage dealt increases by a certain percentage, stacking up to 5 times. You can get a lot of percentage here. Almost 64% from just level 1, 5 times 8, whatever that percentage is. What is that, like 42? 42? I don't know. It's somewhere around there, 42-ish. But yeah. This is a really good one for raw damage, but again, you don't get any crit rate or crit damage from this one, so you're going to have to maybe supply that stuff through your own substats, which is going to be a bit more tough because obviously stat management in these games, in MiHoYo games, is not overly easy, as we know through Genshin Impact. And I've also heard news that relic sets and all that stuff and doing the stats is very, very tough, as there is a lot of substats to get, so it's going to be very tough. But swordplay is a very, very good one if you do have the very optimized substats in your own relic sets and planetary ornaments. But yeah, that is the ones. Universally, only Silence Remains, swordplay in the most niche, in a very situational area where you have good things, and then Return to Darkness if you have nothing else. But overall, In the Night is going to be her best in slot for highest output. Going on to the relic sets, this one's also very simple. Just go for the quantum piece, which is called, where is it? Genius of Brilliant Stars. That's just going to be her best. Simple as that. There's no argument about it. 10% quantum damage on 2 set, and then 4 set when the wearer attacks enemies with quantum weakness. Ignore 25% defense. It's a very powerful one. I think the only ability that I've seen, or only anything that I've seen that ignores defense in the game, I don't think I've seen that before, or I might not remember it, but you just ignore 25% defense on enemies that you are strong against, making her exponentially more powerful in her prime situation, which is very, very good. And that's the 2 set for the relic, or sorry, the 4 set for the relic. As for the planetary ornament, this is where I think that it's quite a clear-cut choice, really. I unironically do believe that it's a clear-cut choice. It's probably Celestial Differentiator because you do want that incredibly high crit rate value. You have to have an 80% chance to obviously crit rate to trigger that last part, which is basic attack and skill damage increased by 20%, which obviously you may be wondering, oh, why don't you go for the ultimate one? You know, the ultimate's the high damage dealer. You're going to be using a skill a lot more frequently, in my opinion, so I think this one will just work a lot more, and basic attack is also fine. But yeah, it's an 80% crit rate dependency, but as we know, there's a lot of crit rate boosting through a lot of different areas of her skill or kits and whatnot, especially if you go into light cones and a bit of stat management. 80% is a very easy feat to achieve, in my honest opinion. So I think Celestial Differentiator is the easy choice here. Very, very easy. Inert Cell Soto, Space Sealing Station are fine choices as well. Don't feel bad about using those ones, but I think Celestial Differentiator is going to make the bigger difference and be the better choice in the long run. So, quick refresh. It was the Genius of Brilliant Stars 4 set for the Relic set, and a Planetary Ornament Celestial Differentiator is my final choice for this. And that has been Seele, the absolute powerhouse unit of HSR, and it's going to carry the early games. Probably going to be the equivalent of a something like a Tartaglia from Genshin. They are obviously here on launch, but it's kind of like that power that you get from the character. He had longevity. He has a lot of longevity from the game, Mr. Tartaglia, and I think Seele's going to have a lot of longevity from the early stages of the game. Very powerful unit, and honestly, if you get her as your first 5-star, you're very lucky. She's going to carry you a long way. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. This has been Seele. If you enjoyed, and if you liked the video, well, like the video, and also sub to the channel. Very lovely time here, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Catch you guys in the next video. Have a great day.